Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished corporate leader from Florida, USA, Tracy Nolan. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the
Thank you.
brand called You.
Thank you. Tracy is the Senior Vice President of Humana, and given all the work that she's been doing, understandably, she's been recognized, awarded, and felicitated several times. So, Tracy, my first question to you, looking back, what early experiences most shaped your leadership mindset before you entered large corporate roles?
So I actually had a father who worked in healthcare who was very committed to customers and making sure that the customer was at the center of all that he did and
Mm,
always was bringing that approach to work. And so he would share with me stories. So right from early age, he would put the customer at the center of what he did, always knowing that he also has to drive a profitable business, but how do you make it better for your consumers so that they would want to stay and work with you? So I really, that whole philosophy, and then I spent some years in retail, and I think the combination of both, where you're serving customers and then seeing him do it in the business world, was probably the first. And then my mom was always a very caring woman, very smart, biology major, but she also was somebody who really, would care for people. So I think the combination of caring and watching my dad put the customers first really were the two things that
mm.
shaped me.
What a great response. Thank you. Tracy, what personal values have remained constant for you, even as your responsibilities have scaled into multi-billion-dollar organizations?
I would say one of the things that has been just kind of threaded through my career is that I've never been somebody who stays comfortable. And what I mean by that is, I had at one point when I was working with at Verizon, someone said to me, "Hey, lots of changes coming. Just put your head down and just do a great job at the job, but just stay with your head down and everything will be okay." And I
Mm,
am so the opposite. I kind of run towards challenges. I take on those things that people are like, "Ooh, that's a risky role." Because number one, I find it fun to solve a problem. But number two, I don't just keep a job or a position just to keep the job. I want to be constantly learning, constantly challenged. And I
mm.
think that's something that a lot of people miss because they are so concerned about what if the future doesn't work out, what would be next. And I've kind of looked at that as I'll figure it out. So I've taken that approach.
Very interesting. You have led organizations through mergers, pandemics, and major disruptions. What does leadership look like when certainty disappears?
Boy, it is so true. And I thought after 9/11, I would never be in a situation where I would have another crisis like that to manage through. I actually landed on 9/11 in Newark Airport
Wow.
at 8:47, and then I spent the next 3 days, 4 days working to try to figure out how to get cell phones to the emergency workers who were working at ground zero.
Mm,
And during that is like everything goes out everything goes out the window of how you normally
correct.
manage or lead in that.
Correct.
And for me is you have to make a lot of decisions without having all the information or all of the data that you probably want.
Mm,
And sometimes you have to trust your gut and do and kind of go with the flow. But I also would say the biggest thing is leaders don't like to, in crisis moments, don't like to get in front of their teams and admit that they don't know what the exact answer is. And
mm,
so they retreat a bit on communication. And I found that if I communicate more, and even if I don't know and I say I'm not sure, but this is the best way we're going to approach it, you
mm.
get more buy-in and people will follow you in a crisis with that when you're just, humble and honest and just tell it as it is versus retreating and just giving orders. So I think that communication piece is so critically important when you're
Mm,
going through things like that.
very well said. Was there a defining moment in your career when you realized you were ready for enterprise level leadership?
For me, I was very fortunate. I actually thought I would be, and I tell the story all the time. I thought I was going to be a school teacher and have lots of children at home. That's that. If you asked me when I was, growing up and even probably in college, I would have said that's what I was going to do. So I never really planned to do what I'm doing today. This
Hmm.
was not like a dream or a goal. It just sort of happened. I would say that. Uh, there were people in my career who, two in particular, who really made the difference for me, where they
Mm,
put me. I remember I got promoted and I was working, and I had to go in front of, promoted into this new VP role, my first VP role, and I had to go in front of the CEO. I think it was like 10 days after I had been promoted. And I think at that point, my boss said, "Hey, you're going to have to present." And I was like, "Well, let me go through what I'm going to present." And he would not look at my presentation. He would not review anything with me. He said, "You're going to do this." And he trusted me more than I trusted myself that I would
mm,
be able to perform well. And I think that was probably at the stage that
mm,
I was like, okay, and then I had the meeting, it went well. And then I was like, okay, I can handle this. And that was
mm,
probably the defining moment. But somebody had to give that to me because I don't think I would have done that on my own, and nor would I
mm.
have realized that I had that ability.
Very interesting. Tracy, you have delivered large scale growth across regulated industries. What does sustainable growth truly mean today?
I go back to how I started a bit on customers because sustainable growth to me is not about just getting top line growth coming in the door or in any fashion or just go get as many customers as
Mm,
humanly possible. But what are you doing to maintain those customers? And how do you build something where customers want to come to you, that you don't have to go out and figure out how they're excited to be part of your organization or to use your product and service because you offer something that's differentiated
mm,
and something that they are excited to stay with. So like I measure a lot of how my team's growing, not from the metrics, but on how the customer feels about utilizing our product. So
mm,
sales is not just about the selling process of bringing them in the door, but it's really about how do you maintain and sustain people who want to be with your organization.
mm. Amazing. How should leaders think differently about growth in highly regulated sectors like healthcare and telecom?
There's lots of regulations on what you can do and how you need to do them in a regulated industry, and it does create. I kind of call it puzzles, right? Like they create different ways of operating.
Correct.
Even things like what you can call a sales agent. Like I
Mm,
would prefer to call them, a customer advocate, but like in a regulated business, you may not be able to do it. So there's
yeah.
all these little nits of rules, but if you
Mm,
still stay
mm,
focused on, you know, providing a service to a customer. And for me, I always like to believe that like our interactions with any sort of prospective member, I feel like sales is the handshake. It's like the first impression. So if I
mm,
stay clear on that we're the first impression, how do we make that great? You can work very well within a regulated industry. And usually that's what
yeah.
regulations is trying to
Yeah.
do, is to provide an exceptional customer experience. And so
Mm,
if you look at it as not roadblocks, but how to help you make that happen, that's kind of how I've always
mm,
done it.
very interesting. How do you align digital innovation with human experience rather than letting technology drive decisions?
And this is a great question because today a lot of people are afraid of technology, or you hear in companies they're replacing all of these, jobs. And I'd like to say that it should be an enhancer, not a replacer. It should make people's jobs easier, but like technology isn't going to take over everything we do, because there's
Mm,
still the human element that is so critically important. And not everyone,
mm,
especially in the sales world, and not everyone wants to buy one certain way, right? But if we can make it easier with technology, that's where I've stayed focused, is how do you, and I always go back to the days where, growing up, I don't know about you, but my mom told me never to get in a car with strangers. And now I do
mm,
that every single day when I get on an Uber. And
mm.
so, like, technology may change what we do, but there's still people working at Uber, but they're
Yeah.
just doing it differently, right? So, like, it's getting ahead of thinking how technology might change how we interact with,
Mm,
members, or how we do the job. But then there's always the piece of there's still opportunity for us to work. And again, if you're staying consistent and learning, and growing, which a lot of executives, even, at any level, but like I'm always taking a course. I'm always like, whether it was a few years ago during COVID, I was taking Spanish because I had a huge group
mm.
of people who work for me who speak Spanish. So I was like, well, why not? Like, why not? I'm always learning about, whether it be corporate discipline, or I'm taking audit classes, board audit classes, like whatever you can do to
Mm.
constantly learn. Technology will not outrun you.
Absolutely. And you're actually living the leader's advice, keep investing in yourself. So you seem to be doing that very effectively. Moving on, Tracy, you have led cultural transformations involving tens of thousands of employees. Where do leaders generally underestimate change?
I think leaders underestimate change every single day, and it's something to get people super comfortable with. And in the beginning, they are never comfortable with change.
Hmm.
But like now, my team right now is thriving on change. Like they're thinking, okay, what is next? How do we recreate, even knowing things
Mm.
are going well, but how do we recreate and make it even better? But it takes time to develop a culture who is comfortable in that, because again, just like I said, a lot of people just want to stand still, but nothing stands still. Time doesn't stand still. And so you can either move forward or backwards. You're really never standing still. And so for me, really building the muscle around strategy, because most people are in operational modes day in and day out. But like when I talk about strategy, it's not something scary or big or that you have to have a
Mm.
degree to do, but just thinking about like, hey, next year, if I was, next year, what do we want to be known for? That just starts to have you think about strategy,
Yeah.
right? And then you can get excited about it. Like, hey, I know Amazon does this whole thing about writing press releases, right? Like they teach their teams at all levels to write the press release of what they're going to be known for next year. And so
Mm.
that type of thinking can get people super excited about strategy, super excited about change. And then that really builds the culture. Because if you just go in and say, hey, we're going to change the way we operate, people automatically think you're going to cut headcount. You're gonna do a
Yeah.
transformation,
Yeah.
reorg, and not necessarily a transformation that could be super positive for the
Mm.
business.
Mm. Amazing. How do you create alignment between purpose, performance, and people?
I love that question too. And um, I'll take you back. Number one, it's all about, setting the goals and what do you want the organization to be?
Mm.
And then ensuring that you have the right people associated that can drive it. And I'm always looking for people who bring special skill sets that I don't have. And I have never been afraid to hire people who are better than me in certain
Yeah.
topics. Like I love that challenge, and a lot of people don't. And then it's all about how do you make that all work together. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And sometimes you have the wrong people, and you need to make changes, because there's nothing worse than a person who's in a role who is trying really hard, but it's just the wrong fit. And so
Mm,
many people are not willing to have those tough conversations. But I love developing people. I love having hard conversations, which I know sounds bad, but like if
mhm,
I'm not pushing people to achieve something uh, that is unique or different that they can be super proud of, then I'm not doing my job. So I think it's aligning where are we going together and then making sure you align the people, and then the process is really the
mm,
third
mm.
spoke that I go to.
Amazing. Well said. How should leaders handle resistance without losing empathy or momentum?
That can be hard, especially if you are, especially, I can think of a situation now where we have an employee whose job's changing quite a bit, although it was really what they wanted. But now that they're starting to get what they want, they're now concerned about it. And there's lots of tears and lots of, although it's a promotion, it
Mm,
shouldn't be this way. But you got to remember that people have feelings and that you need to help them see what they're not seeing in
yeah.
whatever it is. And then also if it's the wrong fit, like that, usually those are the ones that are really struggling, and you need to not not be on like be super honest and direct that hey, maybe this isn't the right thing
Mm,
for them.
mm. Very interesting. What role does emotional intelligence play when you're leading at scale, like you've been doing?
It's very important, and I try to remember that. And I was just telling the story the other day. I had a really tough CFO at one organization, to the point like I'd be going to his office to pitch some sort of business plan that I would want to do, and literally I might be shaking as I was walking down the hallway years ago when I do it, because he's just so tough, so smart, and he would ask all these tough questions. But I walked in his office one day and I could tell something was different, and he had just learned that his mom was going to be moved into hospice. And I saw this tough guy become, emotional.
Mm,
And, I had to play into how to handle that situation with
mm,
him. And we didn't even get to the business plan. We just sat and talked about how wonderful his mom was and how he was going to care for this
mm.
person, his mom going forward. And that EQ, whether it be at any level, is like you never really know what's going on at
Absolutely.
home. You
Mm,
have no idea what's going on. And no matter how large your organization, at one point I had 24,000 people in my org, and we were
wow.
going through COVID, and we were going through integrating into one of the largest US telecom mergers ever. I never lost touch that there's people and what they were going through, emotionally through that. And it's
Mm,
very easy to get caught up in the day to day and forget about asking Diana how her mom's doing, or just checking in, doing check ins like, hey, just check in with you.
mm,
Are you okay? And so utilizing that at every level in leadership is really critical. Just to
mm.
remember, I might even like have a little note on the side of whose birthdays are coming up, and just double checking in, or hey, this person's mom has been sick.
Yeah.
Check in. So I think it's really important. It's
Mm,
really important.
absolutely. What separates leaders who grow stronger during crises from those who struggle?
That's super easy. It's who leans in and jumps forward in the crisis, right? That and without knowing what they're going to be doing, they're the first to raise the hand. They're the first that is going to go ahead and jump in and say, here, put me to work, give me
Mm,
whatever I need to do. Crisis leadership is tough, and you just don't know what you're going to see, hear,
mm,
handle. And in COVID, for me, we were in the process of merging a Sprint with T-Mobile.
mm,
At that point, I had all the stores nationally across the US. We had to keep them open. We had to figure out how to keep employees safe while also keeping our customers safe, not knowing whether you should wear masks, not wear masks, stay 5 feet apart, however
mm,
you do it. People had family members are sick. Do you keep them home because you don't know what the incubation period is? Like all of those things. And so, you know, people were jumping in. Those that really jumped in were leaders who were like, "Hey, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but
Yeah.
what do you need me to do? Go find masks for the stores? Like, let me start
Mm,
calling, dialing up. We're not procurement, but let's go figure out how we're going to get hand
correct.
sanitizer to everybody,
Correct.
right? Like, let's
Correct.
rework the schedule." So, like, those that jump in are really show a unique ability for their leadership and really stand out in crisis.
Absolutely. And COVID was a huge challenge for every organization around the world. And thank you for sharing your example or your story. Moving on, Tracy, what unique strengths do women bring to leadership and board roles, especially during times of disruption?
I will go back to one of the things that I learned as a leader is that I was trying to be like all the other leaders. And, I worked in many organizations where I might be the only female or one of two out of 21 leaders in a boardroom. It happened more than not. And I, s- I had a revelation one day because I felt like I was trying to be like everyone else. As a matter of fact, to the point where the night before our board meeting, I would go and look up all the sports things that were going on the night before, so that I would be able to talk the language about what team won last night. And I literally was researching to
Mm,
be like others
yeah.
versus being myself because
Mm,
I wanted to fit in. And it
yeah.
wasn't until one it was like an aha one day where I said, you know what, I'm just going to be who I am,
Mm,
and and it was almost a relief. It was almost like, oh my gosh, because I am a pretty learned from my mom, I'm a super caring person about others. And I also had people say, hey, you're too caring to be in business. And so I let myself be me. And I
mm,
think a lot of women don't do that. A lot of women are trying to be like others,
yeah.
and especially the men. I mean, it even goes down to wearing, suits every day, right? Like like I wear a colorful dress now because I'm proud of who I am, and if
Mm,
that's what I want to wear, that's what I wear. Like,
absolutely.
I don't try to fit in. And I think
Correct.
when you release yourself to show that caring side and to, be who you are, it releases. And a lot of women struggle with that because they
Mm,
feel like they have to be
absolutely.
like others.
Absolutely.
Now I don't spend time figuring out what sports happen. I'm
Correct.
going to tell you about the show I watched last night or the book I'm reading, right?
Absolutely. Very well said. Absolutely right. And more power to you. Tracy, I've got time for two more questions. How does your mindset change when you move from executive leadership to the boardroom?
It's a big change, and a lot of people struggle with this because if you're an operator, as I have been with large P&L responsibility, the first thing you do is you go in and you're in a boardroom, the first thing you want to do is solve, right?
Mm,
And you want to go ahead and do it. And your role in a boardroom is really about helping question and bringing up ideas to kind of, they always say, nose in, hands out. Like, you're there to advise and to help and
mm,
to push, to help the management team, think differently and to come up with, creative solutions and make sure that they have thought through anything else. But your
mm,
job is not to lead. And so
mm.
it is a different mindset. And a lot of folks who I've known, some love the boardroom who've been operators, and some don't because they don't feel like they have enough
Mm,
control. And
mm.
so you need to make sure you're comfortable with the folks that are running the company,
Yeah,
but at the same time, you're an advisor. You are there to help answer questions and
correct.
help them see others. So it's a big difference.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. And my last question for you, what advice would you give women preparing for senior executive or board positions?
Um, First of all, go for it,
Mhm,
and don't hold back.
mhm,
If that's something you want to do,
mhm.
just make sure that you carve time out for the things that are going to
Yeah,
make your yourself happy. And a lot of times we don't do that. We wait too long because we're thinking, hey, I'll get to it. Because it is a bit of a personal choice versus the corporate choice,
Correct.
right? Of whatever you're working in. So I'd say go for it. And then, and just be yourself. And because, companies need all of us. They need high diversity in all that they do. And we can bring a unique perspective to the boardroom.
Very interesting. And on those two pieces of advice that you've given, go for it and be yourself. And what you said a few minutes earlier, don't try to fit in. Thank you, Tracy, for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. I think you gave us some interesting points about leadership, about culture, about organizations, about women in leadership. And I'm sure my viewers and listeners will have a lot to think about from everything that you've told us. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.